What's going on, everybody? Today we're breaking down all things about the 2025 San Francisco 49ers, including if Christian McCaffrey should still be a round one fantasy football pick in the year 2025, what wide receiver target in this suddenly Deebo Samuel-less room, if we should be drafting George Kittle more than any other tight end in fantasy, and if the community as a whole is sleeping on Brock Purdy's proven upside. All that and more here on today's Fantasy Life show, but I cannot accomplish all this alone, and accordingly we have the one, the only Dwain, the Rock McFarland, in the house as well. So Dwain, welcome to the show, my friend. It's been a pleasure breaking down all these teams with you throughout the offseason. And now we have the reigning last place 49ers from the NFC West. That said, we'll get to the win total at the end of the episode, but man, it is at 10.5. So clearly Vegas and the world at large does believe that bigger things could be coming for Brock Purdy and company. That said, we're going to kick things off with Mr. Usual 101 himself in the fantasy world. That is Christian McCaffrey. A phenomenon was going on, Dwain, where McCaffrey was actually available in the early parts of round 2 during portions of this offseason. That has not persisted. You're now going to likely have to use, a top 8 or top 9 best case pick on him. Are you buying him at that price?
Hey, man, it's a great question. I will tell you this. I was buying all day long when it was at the beginning of round 2. The challenge is if you're playing in these PPR leagues and we've got Brian Thomas Jr., Nico Collins, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Like we have some really good receivers going in that same range. Now, what I will say is if it goes right for CMC, let's say he stays healthy. Let's say he's still as good as he's always been. Guys, he's 29.3 years old. We've had 3 out of the last 5 years. He's dealt with major injury problems. Played 4 games, 7 and 3 if we look at the 2024, 2021, and 2020 seasons. So there's definitely some risk here. But if it were to work out that he's close to what he was in his prime, knowing that he's got this dual threat, ability from a standpoint of rushing as well as what he can do as a receiver and an offense that we like a lot. Yeah, dude, he could be the running back 1 overall, Ian. I think, honestly, Christian McCaffrey is one of the most interesting guys to talk about right now in fantasy football for this year because I don't think you can argue against what the upside is. I think the real question is, how do you evaluate him? I don't think you can just say he's the elite version that we used to have. It's somewhere along a spectrum. I think we have to acknowledge that there is some injury risk. And so the challenge for me, I will say in PPR leagues, I've been taking Brian Thomas Jr. I've been taking Nico Collins in those picks instead of worrying about taking CMC. Half PPR, that changes things up a little bit because we know more of our top 12 scorers do end up coming from running backs. I think in that scenario, which is what you're dealing with, you're talking about best ball contests like underdog. I think he is appropriately moving up to the end of the second round, and I am a little bit more willing to do it. But I will say this, while I know the upside is there, I also have this feeling in my gut. I'm like, man, there's so many other things sitting right around where CMC goes that I also really love that don't have some of the red flags he does. Maybe they don't have quite the ceiling he has, but they also still have really good ceilings in their own right. So I've mixed it up. I think that he is worth it in half PPR towards the end of round 1. I think in PPR, he should be more of an early round 2, but I don't know where you're landing on it.
I mean, the best case scenario, like you said, is might just single-handedly win your fantasy. This guy is the RB1 ever in terms of PPR points per game. I mean, only Jim Brown and LaDainian Tomlinson have also averaged, north of 20 for the bulk of their career. So how's that going for him? And even the injury stuff, man, yes, I know it has come out. And I think when you do draft a guy as high as we've been forced to do, it stands out more in our memory. But Jonathan Taylor has missed more games due to injury than Christian McCaffrey over the past 3 seasons. I don't necessarily see that being held against him the same way. I know that McCaffrey, based on his age, based on the past injuries, yes, I will say that he is quote unquote more injury prone than someone like Bijan Robinson, but it's not 10 out of 10 versus 0 out of 10. So I don't want to completely go out of my way to overstate it. And I will say, Dwain, when we do, converse with some of the Twitter doctors out there, specifically Dr. Jeff Mueller, who does a great job, kind of just putting some complicated medical stuff more into fantasy terms, he sounds like he's pretty good with everything. In fact, he quote tweeted one of your tweets and basically said, I would be betting on Christian McCaffrey this season, but that's just me, the injury guy. So always appreciate Jeff. You guys can follow him at JMThrivePT on Twitter. But yeah, man, look, I'm with you where I was drafting him almost every single time I could when he was going in the early parts of round 2. Haven't been completely going out of my way now that he's at pick 8 or so, but I think that is about the right price point. Bijan, Saquon, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Christian McCaffrey. While I do think Devon Achane, just in terms of youth and in terms of that explosive ability that maybe CMC doesn't have these days, that would be the last running back I would probably go with ahead of CMC. But man, once again, if there's any running back out there that you had to bet on having over 1,000 rushing yards and over 100 catches, it's only CMC.
Yeah, no, look, he can win your league. And I hear what you're saying over the last 3 years. I was just looking at the injury stuff and like some major stuff there. But when I did and where the quote tweak came, from Mueller was whenever I talked about the week 1 projections, like, because I did the week 1 projections like, I don't know, 6 weeks ago. And I mean, CMC comes in number 1 overall. So on the weeks that he's playing, and again, that speaks to the upside. There's just certainly some risk. And so it just becomes a challenge. Like I'll say this, like I'm taking Jamar Chase, I'm taking Justin Jefferson, Bijan Robinson, I'm taking over him. CeeDee Lamb, I'm taking over him. Jahmyr Gibbs, I'm taking over him. Saquon Barkley, I'm taking over him as well. I think you could make an argument around Saquon kind of being a similar phase, hasn't had the injury issues that you've had with McCaffrey. I'm also going to take Puka Nacua over him, right? And Puka is going over him right now on Underdog. I think, where you get into the questions in a half PPR, you can tell me yes or no, Ian, you're taking Christian McCaffrey over these players. And I'm going to test you right away. Nico Collins.
No.
Yeah, see, it's tough. Malik Neighbors.
Neighbors would be the one where I think I lean CMC.
All right. Brian Thomas Jr.
CMC.
Okay. Ashton Genty.
CMC.
Okay. Yeah. Look, it's a really good tier right there, guys. And I didn't even mention Derrick Henry and Devon Achane, who are going, still at the beginning of round 2 and are a great pick. So it's just, man, honestly, picks 1 through 17 essentially I feel great about right now in fantasy football. And I feel really good about a lot of the ones going after that. But I mean, it's just, this might be the most loaded round 1.5 that I can remember. And most of them are young players in their prime. CMC happens to be one of the older guys along with Derrick Henry that's in there.
Again, I think there's almost arguably 21 players, Dwayne, those top 10 running backs and the top 11 wide receivers where, look, we have them ranked where we have them ranked. I wouldn't put CMC 21st or anything like that in that group. But, man, it is a tier. I know I was quick to say CMC over Neighbors and BTJ, but I wouldn't, curse anyone out for kind of flipping that around. And honestly, again, just giving the age ramifications of it, maybe it isn't the worst idea just to go ahead and take the young upside wide receiver ahead of old man CMC at this point. But, man, if we are taking a page out of Ricky Bobby's playbook and saying first or last, maybe not the best fantasy strategy if your league does have one of those horrible last place punishments. I get it. CMC is a sort of lottery ticket to buy in the early parts of round 1 because, again, no one really does match that upside when you do go back and look at things historically. That said, we have seen what happens when CMC is out, and usually, Dwayne, his backup all of a sudden becomes a true lottery ticket in fantasy football land. Last year, that was Jordan Mason for the first 8 weeks of the year, but he has taken his talents to Minnesota. Of course, he got traded there. It wasn't exactly his choice. But also we have Elijah Mitchell out of the picture. Yes, they did add 5th rounder Jordan James as competition, but really does seem like Isaac Guerendo is actually the next man up should anything happen to CMC. So we got to see Guerendo in 4 appearances last year where he eclipsed a snap rate of at least 50%. He finished as the PPR RB10, RB2, RB25, and RB11. So no, I don't think we'd be crossing off CMC's name as, the RB3 or RB4 and putting Guerendo in there, but we could legit see a top 12 performance from Guerendo, God forbid anything happens to CMC.
Yeah, Guerendo played really well. I think the challenge with Shanahan is we don't ever know. Like, he is very good at shrouding who his running back 2 is, sometimes who his running back 1 is, sometimes who a healthy player is. Like, this guy is like, his play designs are all based around like subterfuge, right? And like confusing defenses. You think one thing and then it's another. He's the same way with the media. He's the same way whenever he handles like helping us try to understand what's going on here. I don't think we can completely dismiss, Jordan James from having a role. I mean, considering they spent draft capital on the guy, but I mean, we've just been full multiple years, right, on this front. I can go back to the Raheem Mostert stuff, the Elijah Mitchell stuff. Like, there's just been so many years when we thought we really had a bead on it, and we didn't. So I'm with you. I think that Guerendo is the guy that, and I have been drafting Guerendo in my fantasy drafts. He's the guy that's most likely. But this is one of those rooms where it wouldn't surprise me at all if Jordan James was like the guy that suddenly started getting more work than Guerendo, and we wouldn't be surprised. So the bottom line is, though, once we know who it is, if we can get it pinpointed, we know that it's just a very fruitful situation for fantasy players, especially the running back. So that'll be a big storyline that we'll be trying to decipher. No guarantees here, guys, on whether or not we'll be able to decipher it. Sometimes, it just works itself out, right? And it might be something that we're talking about on waiver wires on week 3 or something like that. But I wouldn't fully discount Jordan James.
One of these situations where, again, if we are going to be ranking the top handcuffs in the league, certainly have more confidence in maybe guys like Ray Davis, Tyler Algier, Jordan Masons of the world actively taking over their backfield no matter what. Not saying Guerendo couldn't put up similar numbers as those guys, but again, just based on the history of Shanny. And now the newfound presence of James could be a bit more problematic and just assuming that. But man, Dwayne, if we're sitting here in week 6, I know what the waiver wire fab recommendations would be for Guerendo. God forbid something happens to CMC. So if possible, still very much a running back you would like to have stashed on the old fantasy bench. Let's move on to this passing game because there's a lot going on here. Again, Deebo Samuel now a Washington Commander. Brandon Aiyuk looking like someone who could be spending the early part of the season on the PUP list, leaving us with former first-round pick Ricky Pearsall, which, yeah, I know whenever you got to introduce anyone as former first-round pick, maybe not the best thing, but given the reality that, yeah, he got shot last year and missed the first half of the season, flashed a little bit at the end, maybe bigger and better things could be here to come. And also former breakout star, Jauan Jennings, I think we can say that was the case last year, what he did. Maybe he's going to be the wide receiver 1. So time for everyone's favorite game, Dwayne. Honestly, they're all kind of priced around themselves, so we don't have to worry about ADP too much. But Mary cut start, 49ers wide receivers edition, Jauan Jennings, Ricky Pearsall, and Aiyuk, go.
All right, so I'm changing this a little. I'm going to marry and start Jauan Jennings, and I'm going to bench Ricky Pearsall. He's going to be, I'm stashing him, and I'm cutting Brandon Aiyuk. I hate to do it, but man, right now, I mean, we're sitting here. We don't know when he's going to play. He could miss half the season. The other thing with Brandon Aiyuk, as much as we love all of his underlying data, and this goes back to even early last year, we've just never truly seen him break out in that wide receiver 1 fashion. So trying to come back from an injury this year, might miss part of the season, might not be 100% once he's finally back. I just feel like there's a lot of question marks with him. I don't mind Brandon Aiyuk in fantasy drafts this year, but he could be a roster clogger for a good bit of the season, Ian. And so I think there's enough questions with it that I like. And here's the other thing. He could be coming once he's healthy and he's able to come back. If Jauan Jennings is balling out, and let's say Ricky Pearsall does take another step forward after them spending a late first-round pick on him in 2024, who's to say that Brandon Aiyuk is just going to step right into this 85, 90% route participation? They could just kind of rotate all 3 guys. And that would honestly be smart if you've got a guy coming back from the type of injury that Brandon Aiyuk has. So Aiyuk, I think you and I are probably on the same page. When we watch Brandon Aiyuk eyeball tests, I love him. Dude, and he was perfect with Deebo. Deebo was, basically on zone plays. He's the front side read, and the backside read, was Aiyuk if you get the man coverage, right? And he's the slant beater. He can beat you over the top. Really good route runner. Can run after the catch. All the things you want. Brandon Aiyuk's a really great football player. But Jennings is the guy that I would start. He's also the guy I would marry for now. And I threw this tweet out there because I've, again, working on a big breakout article. And I was really interested, and how did year 5 breakouts ultimately do? Were they more just flash in the pans, or what did they look like the next season? So Emmanuel Sanders was one of them, Ian, and he went from 18.8 fantasy points per game in his breakout year 5, down to 15.2. So he went from being a wide receiver 1 to being a wide receiver 2. Will Fuller, we'll never know, guys. Unfortunately, 17.2 fantasy points per game, and then he was injured, and then ultimately, Will Fuller just disappeared. He might be on that fantasy island that you keep talking about. Maybe we can join up and play a guillotine league together. Doug Baldwin was a year 5 breakout, 16.8 fantasy points per game, went down to 15.6. Now, remember with Baldwin, we also did have Golden Tate leave. With Emmanuel Sanders, he switched to the Denver Broncos, went to go play with Peyton Manning. Will Fuller what happened? DeAndre Hopkins left. So you're seeing a trend here. Golden Tate left from the Seahawks and went to play with Matthew Stafford in the Detroit Lions. He scored 16.2 fantasy points as a fifth-year breakout. The next year, a little bit of a dud for Tate, but I think we know he had some bounce-back years after that. He went out of 13.2. I'll speed it up here. Edelman, 15.5. The next year scored 15.9. Mike Williams, 15.3. The next year he was a wide receiver 3 at 13.6. Adam Thielen, probably the best comp to Jauan Jennings, because a guy that didn't get to do a lot early in his year, played in an offense where he had some really good players in front of him, but got to hang around on the team. 15.2 fantasy points, jumped up to 19.2 after his breakout. And then if we look at Christian Kirk, 14.3 to 12.9. So Jauan Jennings is the other one here, Ian, 14 to question mark. But that's a pretty good list. Most of those guys either they went up or they didn't fall off that much. And I think the other thing that we have here for Jauan Jennings that's part of the recipe for all of these guys is there is a change. Deebo Samuel is now gone from this team. We have Brandon Aiyuk probably out the first half of the season. We just talked about him. We don't know what he's really going to look like even when he's back. And so he's really got CMC, good target earner, George Kittle, good target earner, but Ricky Pearsall's an unknown. So I feel like we have a player that broke out, did really well, and now we're heading into a year after where there's an opening in the offense for him just to keep doing his thing. And the one other thing I would say with this is if Brandon Aiyuk, like when he broke out, like the intensity hadn't been so strong. But Ian, you saw it. It was even before Deebo Samuel was hurt. This dude was out here posting 25% target shares, right? And I get it. It didn't always turn into a ton of fantasy points. The 49ers offense, honestly, guys, for what we're used to, overall, it was just a little bit dysfunctional last year. It just wasn't the same 49ers offense. So when I look at Brandon Aiyuk, man, like I'm passing on him. But whenever I look at Jauan Jennings, like I want to draft as much as I can at this point. After doing this research, I'm like, man, I think I'm all in on Jauan Jennings. I think I'm going to probably be drafting him in pretty much every draft that I'm in, but I can't draft him every draft, Ian, but I'm going to make a pretty big stand on Jauan Jennings. I think a lot of things working here. And this is the main thing. I was worried I was going to look this data up and I was just going to see a bunch of guys that had one fluky year and then they all went away. And that's not what the data said. Yes, some of them declined, but man, they were still good.
A lot of really good names you just listed. And I think the big thing for me with, also being a believer in Jennings at this point, he would be the guy I'd be marrying in this equation, is the fact of how efficient he was with those opportunities, even as it expanded. All right. I mean, we can talk about the basketball reference, where you have a 3-point shooter, he can make 50% of his shots on 4 attempts per game. You ask him to start making, that same sort of, percentage on 8 or 9 shots per game. Not many guys are going to be able to do that. Jennings really did do that last year. I mean, his targets per out run overall, Dwain, 14th among over, freaking 80 receivers out here. You look at the yards per out run. He was also top 15 in that, surrounded by guys like CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Drake London, the best of the best. You go turn on the film. This is not a Quentin Johnston situation. It's not, a Tucker Kraft situation where it's like, oh my God, how did Jennings get that wide open again? This dude is going out there and winning 50-50 balls like a grown freaking man. And yeah, why did he knock down the field more often before? Because it was a Super Bowl contender with Deebo Samuel, Brandon Aiyuk, George Kittle, and Christian McCaffrey to get the ball to. So yeah, I think it would make sense that you actually remove some of those variables from the equation. Jennings gets a chance to step up. So I am with you. I'm marrying Jennings. And now, I'm hyped too. Let's just start drafting right now, Dwain, and try to get this dude on more and more teams. Again, the fact that he's going right now over on Underdog Fantasy, good reference for current ADP. Very affordable. You would think someone who just had the season he did would be rising up, but really hasn't overly been the case. Just a wide receiver 34 right now after, again, he finished as a wide receiver 26 last season. Talk about Ricky Pearsall, though, who in this scenario, yes, I would be starting. With Aiyuk, it just comes down to the injury, guys. And also, again, mentioned before, but Dr. Jeff Mueller has been talking about the fact that it seems like Aiyuk had an MCL in addition to the ACL tear that he's rehabbing. Again, once you have more than just the ACL, it complicates things. Given just the nature of all that going on, it does seem like 4+ games could be an issue on top of a problem getting the efficiency back. So earlier portion of this offseason when I thought it might have just been an ACL and things were rehabbing okay, I could more so get behind Aiyuk. But right now, man, if you're in a league where you can just stash him on IR all season, or at least, for half the year before you get him back, that's fine. Keeper leagues, that's always a good, thing to do as well. But for now, and for the purposes of this, we'll be getting rid of him. What are your thoughts on Pearsall, Dwain? Because I feel like any conversation about him focuses on the good things, which is cool. Had the huge game against Detroit down the stretch, another nice one against the Cardinals. You watch some of the routes he had against man coverage. He ran that, stop and go, and then he actually broke it off at the end that, just makes film analysts go absolutely crazy. So I get it. There's some goodness there. They also used them on the, the motion at the snap routes. You can tell they had a plan. They drafted them in the first round, for a reason. That said, can we break one tackle all year? One. And we also had a 3-week stretch, bro, where he had 21 yards, even though he was running around 69% of the dropbacks. So I feel like there were good things, but I also feel like all the bad things, everyone just goes, well, yeah, he got shot in August. What do you want from the guy? Which honestly might be a good excuse for it. So I'm having a hard time again with where to land on Pearsall. I don't love the talent, but man, maybe we are just, underestimating what this dude can do now with a fully healthy offseason.
I mean, I think the thing that, gets people is you look at the last 2 weeks when he truly got to playing more of a full-time role. Before that, he had worked his way into a rotation. But over the last 2 games of the season, 80 and 93% route participation, and he scored 29 and 19 fantasy points in those 2 games. So I think it's just enough to kind of get the twinkle in the eye going of, man, this guy might be really good. If you look at his average depth of target in those games too, he wasn't just a gadget player. To your point, though, they were giving him some of those design looks, but also he was just getting open and doing some nice things down the field. I am with you. I do think there's a tendency to want to go crazy over a couple of little things that we may see on film, but how consistently do you see that? I will say this is a guy that Matt Harmon was very high on coming in as a rookie over in reception perception and talking about his ability as a route runner. So again, late first-round pick, flashed at the end of last year. He's going to have an opportunity. I think you could have something really good on your hands early in the season for Pearsall. My question, though, is with where he's getting priced at right now in drafts, what happens once Brandon Aiyuk comes back? I feel like and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Jauan Jennings is at just as much of a risk as Ricky Pearsall is, once Brandon Aiyuk comes back. Or maybe it's just all of them rotate more, right? And it just makes it a little bit more messy once Aiyuk is back. So I feel like Pearsall would have to really just go to be in a scenario where by the end of the year, you're also still feeling really good about it. But again, maybe I should feel more that way about Jauan Jennings than I do Ricky Pearsall. And maybe I just have a bias here that I don't realize. So I think both players are fine picks for where you're getting them. I lean to Jauan Jennings, though, because I saw him do it for a full season. I saw Ricky Pearsall put a little bit on tape and have a nice couple of games at the end of the year, whereas Jennings was doing it early when the offense was still more crowded. And, again, just continue to do it all season. And guys, look, I'll hand up. I wrote in the utilization report last year, go back and check it when Jauan Jennings broke out and scored whatever it was. What was it, Ian, that he scored?
171, 3 touchdowns.
46.5 fantasy points in a PPR league in week 3. And I wrote in the utilization report, don't fall for the Jauan Jennings trap and bid all your fab money. I was wrong. But I had reasons for that. Historically, you just hadn't seen guys with Jauan Jennings' profile as far as his target earning and all those different things suddenly break out. Now, he managed to keep it going, and so now I've adjusted my priors because what he did all season long, and you heard that list that I gave, I think there's a lot of positive things there with Jennings. So I lean more towards Jennings. I could see it end up being Pearsall being the guy that ends up being more valuable out of the two. But with Jennings, with Pearsall, I think that Aiyuk's a little bit more of a threat to him once he returns.
That aforementioned, mistake by you, Dwain, was the first and only miss of your fantasy analyst career. So it's okay. Just don't ever.
It's gonna be my last.
Don't ever let it happen again. So now, question: what if the real answer to Aiyuk versus Jennings versus Pearsall is just George Kittle? Now, okay, look, Kittle's going much earlier in drafts. Obviously, people are expecting him to put up plenty of numbers in his own right. But man, Dwain, you've kind of been talking about this all offseason long about Kittle being the one that you want to be drafting the most. Is George Kittle, as things stand today here on July 7th, your most drafted tight end of the offseason?
Well, he was, and I want to tell all of you listeners, I love you, but you're also pissing me off because now I can't get George. I feel like he gets like, dude, 1 or 2 picks right in front of me, and someone will take the clock down, and they're making the right pick. You're making the right pick. You're taking George Kittle, but like I want George Kittle as much as I can. He should not be going in round 4 of drafts. He is starting to move up the board. Like he should be going closer to McBride and Bowers. And guys, I totally get it. This is an older player. He hasn't shown the target earning ability over the last 2 years that we've seen that was at an elite level last year from McBride as well as Bowers. But again, he's in a situation that's changing as well. Deebo Samuel is gone from this offense. We've already just talked about everything with Aiyuk. I don't think we can dismiss it. Last year, we saw him jump to 22% targets per route run. But man, if we go back to his prime, Ian, 24, 28, 31, 26% targets per route run. And I kind of hear this narrative out there that, yeah, Kittle's not really the high-end targeter. We know he's really just the big playmaker. If Aiyuk doesn't come back healthy, if Pearsall doesn't really round into form, like, dude, I think there's a lot of ways. Like, I get it. George Kittle's going to be 32 years old this year, but I would not be surprised at all, man, if he had a targets per route run like 24%. I think that's very reasonable. He could have like a 24, 25% target share on this team. And here's the thing. He has something the other 2 guys haven't shown yet. He can work deeper down the field. When we talk about ADOT and we think back to Rob Gronkowski, Jimmy Graham, the guys that truly broke fantasy at the tight end positions. Travis Kelce is another one of these, and it takes the ability to break the big plays and to score a bunch of touchdowns. If you're an underneath guy, it's tough, man, Ian, to score 11 or 12 touchdowns. You might score 5 or 6 in a good year. But Kittle truly is one of the guys that, man, if this thing gets consolidated around him, he has the capability to put up 10 touchdowns. He put up 11 in 2022. So I just look at that ability after the catch, the ability to really stretch out the seams. He's a guy you never have to take off the field because he can block. He can do all of it. The only knock on George Kittle is that he's going to be 32 and you got to deal with injury report stuff all year long. Like, you're just going to have to. Yeah. George Kittle's going to be questionable for 40% of your games. But if we look at the games missed, man, he missed 2 last year, 1 the year before, 2 the year before. Like, I can live with that. If on a points per game basis, I'm suddenly getting a guy that might be able to give me a ceiling of 20 fantasy points per game. And I get it. People are sitting here going, Dwayne, like, you're just completely sniffing glue. No, I mean, I'm not. Whenever we look over here at the ceiling and floor logic for fantasy life, his ceiling is right at 19 fantasy points per game. So, I mean, it's not quite to that 20, but I'm telling you right now, like, I've only got him at 4.5 receptions per game. If I give him a similar receptions per game to Brock Bowers and Trey McBride, I'll just do it. Let's just do it live. Hopefully my lights don't flicker in the background. Guess what? He passes both their ceilings.
Ooh.
Why? Because he's a better yards after the catch player. He's going to give you a better chance to score touchdowns. And he was already the tight end 1 last year. So anyway, I've gone and on and on. Let's let you say some nice things about George Kittle, Ian. I'm sure he's one of your most drafted tight ends as well. But man, right now, round 4, George Kittle, actually one of my absolute biggest stands, and probably will be one of the keys to winning fantasy football in 2025, in my opinion, if we get George Kittle right.
Like you, couldn't quite get him the number 1 spot because, let's face it, it's just harder to do that in general with the earlier round picks. Comes down to more so where your starting draft spot was a lot of times. But he is still tied for 4th with Trey McBride, Dwayne. So I really have been going hard in the paint, trying to get that early round tight end start because I do love just the ability to only roster 2 tight ends after you get to that point. So, yes, if I can't get Kittle, I'm looking more so at guys like Evan Ingram, David Njoku, of course, Mike Gesicki down the way. But, man, with Kittle, what's the floor scenario? Like, okay, everyone can get hurt. I get that. Like, that's a scenario for everyone. But since 2018, ranking PPR points per game, 3rd, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 2nd, 6th in 2023. Oh, my God. And then 1st last year. So, yeah, he is getting a little bit longer in the tooth, but I don't think the 49ers would have just literally in April gave him a $76 million extension if they had any doubts about this dude's ability. And again, Dwayne, like, just think about in week 4 of the season, all right, if we had a situation where Aiyuk and Deebo Samuel were out. of course we'd be ranking Kittle as number one tight end. We'd be going absolutely crazy for it. So when we have this happening in the offseason, why are we not going absolutely loco for it? Well, okay, you and me actually are. So let's continue doing that and hopefully laugh our way straight to the bank. One more player to talk about, though, is another guy who got a big time extension this offseason, and that is Brock Purdy. Someone who, man, Dwain, two seasons ago, we had that 3-game stretch, no Deebo Samuel, no Trent Williams. 49ers are only able to score 17 points. And oh my God, Purdy is just, this system quarterback. He needs everyone else around him. Look what happened last year. Aiyuk's gone by week 7. Deebo's a shell of himself. CMC plays 4 games. Trent Williams misses the second half of the year. Brock Purdy still puts up the best, not the best advanced efficiency numbers in the league, but 8.5 yards per attempt. His EPA per dropback was up there with anyone. He still managed to give us QB1 caliber production, despite, having a shell of the offense that we're used to seeing. So again, there's been this kind of just, hey, are the 49ers actually going to stay with them long term, or are they just going to keep taking advantage of these rookie contract QBs? That's filled. We're feeling better, at least a little bit. The offense is healthier for the time being. Can't guarantee it, but we actually, I would say this time compared to last year, have a far better floor to feel better about with Brock Purdy here. He averaged more rushing fantasy points per game than even Bo Nix last season. What are we missing, Dwain? Because he's my QB 10, which I believe is the highest of any of the rankers, and I feel good about it.
No, I really do. I do like him as well. When I've written up an article about quarterback ceilings and floors and how really rushing and passing come together. And we shouldn't be so binary when we think about it, right? Like it's like bringing all these aspects together. And Brock Purdy is definitely one of these names. To your point, rushing for 22 yards per game last season, like he does know that, scrambling is an easy way to pick up those first downs, add some EPA to the offense, seems to be a very smart player as well. And whenever you look at the range that he grades out in, we're talking about probably 250 to 274 passing yards per game. But man, if you can be in that 20 to 29 rushing yards per game, that gives you a shot, at being one of these guys that really can put together a nice season. And if suddenly maybe you spike for a little bit more in the rushing department and then you spike a little bit more in the passing department, it does certainly open up some upside. If we look at the Fantasy Life ceiling and floor projection model right now, Brock Purdy's his median projection is 17.7, but his ceiling projection is 22.7, right there in a range with, and we've some guys that we like that are close, but you got Drake May, Caleb Williams, Trevor Lawrence, Brock Purdy. Like those are all guys that I am drafting a lot. It will not surprise me at all if Brock Purdy, ranks as like the QB6 this year. Like he could, and here's the thing, like the 49ers defense, man, they've taken on some losses, Ian. Like they can't pay all these guys. Now Brock Purdy's off of that, basically freebie rookie contract. They've taken a lot of hits on the defensive side of the ball. I know they tried to do some things to account for it, but man, some good players are gone. So that could lead to some more shootouts. We just saw this the last year with the Bengals, right? That could lead to a little bit higher pass rate. So I just think there's a lot of paths here for Purdy this season specifically to really be one of these guys that we look up and we're in like week 6 or 7. We're like, man, Brock Purdy, he's the QB6 right now. I would not be surprised at all.
Again, QB7 in fantasy points per game in 2023. And even in a relative down year for a 49ers offense that did not match our expectations, to still put up top 10 fantasy numbers, I think is very telling of what we're dealing with. Plenty of room for passing touchdown regression as well, Dwain. We're talking about a guy who had 7.6% and 7% marks in 2022 and 2023, dipped down just 4.4% last year. So again, really does check a lot of these boxes. And it's another reason where especially guys in home redrafts, I got Brock Purdy in this mock draft we did at Fantasy Life like a month or two ago, literally round 14, round 15, because you're in some of these leagues, people prefer, the Caleb Williams of the world, the Dak Prescotts of the world. I'm not saying they can't outscore Brock Purdy, but again, waiting on the position if at all possible, always going to be one of these guys that falls. Maybe it could be you that gets to, again, break that and go ahead and get him. So going to take us to the win total, Dwain. I mentioned at the top of the show, sitting high at 10.5, but you know what? I'm going to take the over here. This is a situation where, again, last year, I thought more so injury induced than this giant fall off from the organization or Shanahan or Purdy all of a sudden being bad at their jobs. Ultimately, I think the offense is good enough. I think the front offense and coaching staff is good enough to get over 10.5, especially with what is seemingly by far the easiest NFL schedule, getting to play fourth place teams all over the place, and just every single schedule propaganda piece I've seen really does seem to favor the 49ers. So over 10.5 for me. What say you?
Yeah, I'm going to take the over. I mean, I think there's a little bit of risk here. You lose Dre Greenlaw, you lose Javon Hargrave. Hargrave was an older player, but a good interior player. You lose the safety Talanoa Hafunga. I knew I was going to mess that up. Aaron Banks, Shavarius Ward. So a lot of guys like moving on this offseason. Now, like I mentioned earlier, it's not like they just stood pat. They did spend their picks on defense, right? You got Michael Williams. Now the round 1 pick is going to be playing at right defensive end. Then their round 2 pick went Alfred Collins. So he's going to be probably a starting defensive tackle. And then they also added a linebacker in round 3, Nick Martin. So, and he's going to be playing the will linebacker. So they definitely, well, actually they had 2 round 3 picks. So they also drafted a nickelback. So they heavily invested. Will all those picks hit? I don't know. Like some of the players that left we already knew that they were pretty good. But I mean, there is a chance that youth is enough to offset, what left. So I'm with you. I'm taking the over. It's also just Kyle Shanahan. I think Purdy's a really good player. I like the offense. We know it's a good scheme. All those things working together. So 10.5 felt, like kind of tight, but I can go 11. I can go 11 wins. So I'll take the over.
Over 10.5 wins. So speaking of 10, feel free to use code QB10, QB10, over at fantasylife.com. Get you 10% off our Fantasy Life Plus premium package. Basically your one-stop shop for hopefully getting you those fantasy football championships and generally just making your life better overall. Isn't that what it's all about at the end of the day? Really does seem to be correlated, at least in these streets. So anyway, that's going to wrap up this edition of the Fantasy Life Show. Like and subscribe if you're into that kind of thing. And yeah, otherwise go try to enjoy life. For Dwain, for producer Matt, for producer Kelsey, I'm Ian. Thanks again for tuning in. Until next time, take care, everybody.